Hello, BookTube. I've got a little mail for you today on a Saturday. I had mail for you yesterday, and it did not work out. It was like a trip down memory lane. It was one package after another that I started yelling at. One package after another that just infuriated me. And it's been so long since that happened that I lost my our agreed upon catchphrase of food for thought. I lost that reflex and eventually just realized there's no way that you can upload this video. So I saved one of the books. One book in yesterday's book haul, mail haul, did not offend in that way, did not just aggressively posit a reality that does not exist. One book didn't do that, and it seems really interesting to me, so I want to show you that as well today, as well as the packages that we'll open. But first, we could look at periodicals. I got the new London Review of Books. You remember the last London Review of Books had a letter that infuriated me, where a letter writer wrote in saying that the claims that were made about the Black Death killing half of Europe was just those weird medieval people exaggerating. You know how the medievals were, they exaggerated, and that by implication the plague was not nearly that bad. And at the time of reading that letter to you, I fulminated because we have all sorts of records. We have all sorts of records. It's not just a question of one person getting one figure wrong. It's not a question of figures at all. It's not a question of any one person narrating what they remember. But if we're going to talk about what we remember, well, Deb and I could both tell you about the Black Death in Europe because we both noticed that a larger than normal number of our lovers were dying, and not from the usual cause, which is, of course, shame-driven suicide. So it's definitely empirically true, but I wasn't going to write in. I've just renewed my subscription to the London Review of Books. I wasn't going to bombard them with an angry letter to the editor. I was waiting to see if someone else would. And someone did. I'm very happy to say that someone did in this issue. I want to read you that. Hugh Pennington thinks Tom Shippey should have questioned what Pennington believes to be exaggerated mortality statistics. Specifically claimed that the Black Death killed half of Europe's population in the mid-14th century. Pennington also dismisses the picture of death and devastation described in chronicles and letters as ramblings of, quote, the medieval mind prone to exaggeration. The very thing that irritated me. According to an earlier consensus, the Great Pestilence claimed between 20 and 30% of Europe's population, but these figures were based on limited empirical evidence. Since the 1960s, historians and demographers have examined a variety of local sources, including censuses, tax records, memorial registers, all the things I was mentioning. The Norwegian historian Ole Benedictau synthesized these disparate studies in The Black Death his book, The Black Death from 2004, which we saw on this channel, and reached a startling conclusion. The plague killed approximately 60% of Europe's inhabitants, about 50 million out of a population of 80 million. Okay, so more than half. Great. I'm hoping that the original person who talked about medieval exaggeration writes a shamefaced apology in the next issue. That would be great. My only quibble with that letter is that the letter writer goes out of their way to call the Black Death the Great Pestilence in an admonitory way, in a censoring way, in a way that tells my paranoid mind that if the writer of the letter had the ability to enforce that at gunpoint, they would. It's a silly change, Black Death, Great Pestilence. It's a silly change. The reason I am sure that the letter writer is in academia, and I am sure that the stupid change was made and is being enforced at gunpoint so as not to use the word black in a derogatory way. But that's my only quibble. That's a little quibble. The writer actually says that if anything, the estimates of half of Europe were wrong. They were conservative. Great, just what I wanted to hear. So we'll see. We'll see if that continues in the next installment. And then the next thing that I want to show you is not part of a book haul. It's part of a dog walk. The Bean and I went out on a walk, and we came across a little free library, and I grabbed an appropriately battered copy in hardcover of The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt, which is my favorite book of hers by a wide margin. You've got the painting right there. And my mass market paperback is in even worse shape than this thing. This thing has some gunk on it that can be cleaned off, some gunk on it that probably can't be cleaned off. But I myself find that that gunk like this, coffee spills, cup rings, things like that, I myself find I like the character that they give a book, provided they're not prohibitive to reading the book. I find that I like that. And my mass market paperback cannot stand another reading of this thing. So I saw it; it was free, so I grabbed it, tucked it under my arm, and kept going. And then we have the one book that escaped the SJW virtue signaling storm that afflicted the mail yesterday, and that's this. This is by Corinna Barrett Lane, and it's called Secrets of the Killing State, The Untold Story of Lethal Injection. And this sounds absolutely fascinating. I dipped a toe in it last night after I talked about it on camera, and almost read the whole thing, even though it's a 2025 release. It comes out, I think, in the spring. Yeah, in April. Let me read you about this. I want to know your thoughts on the subject. This is about exactly what the title says here. This book, let's see here. We are now over 45 years into the lethal injection era, and most Americans still have no idea what states are doing in their name. It's time they found out. This book pulls back the curtain of secrecy, presenting a view of lethal injection that states have worked hard to hide. In the popular imagination, lethal injection is a slight pinch and a swift nodding off to forever sleep. It is performed by well-qualified medical professionals, it is regulated and carefully conducted, and it is the most humane form of capital punishment. In reality, none of those things is true. The story of lethal injection is a story of fake science, torturous drugs, gross incompetence, law-breaking, woefully inept executioners, and a stunning state indifference to the plight of the prisoners who are executed. These are the secrets of the killing state, all that we know from litigation files, investigative journalism, autopsy reports, scientific studies, interviews, and scholarship across a number of fields. People know there are problems with lethal injection, but they don't know how much about what those problems are, or about how they came about, or why they matter. And this book answers those questions. So, forthright agenda setting and agenda correcting nonfiction. I would hope that in the spring this gets written about widely. It raised a whole bunch of questions in my mind. A friend of mine, Jack Hanson, he was recently on this channel. A number of you have called for his return. He's a busy guy, but I would like it too. He just had wrote a piece on the death penalty, and in our interview called it an absolute moral abomination. And I very much liked, of course I like this, you already know that I like this, but it bears repeating, especially as we close this year. I very much like the fact that Jack and I can be friends and have such an animated conversation, even though I think it's pretty obvious when you watch that video that I disagree with him on the subject of the death penalty. I mean, we didn't even talk about the means. We were just talking about the idea that the state can kill someone. He's incredibly eloquent on the subject. It's a joy to me that he is finding the time to write periodical pieces. It feels wrong to call them periodical pieces because that would technically make them the same kind of thing I write. There's no connection between what Sam Sachs does in the Wall Street Journal every week, what Jack Hanson does when he has the time. There's no connection between that and what I do. But nevertheless, you know what I mean. The presence of that article by Jack and also the issues raised by this book had me thinking like crazy about this subject for a large chunk of the evening. The one regret I had about that ranty, ravey, yelly, screamy video was that I didn't get to ask you questions about this, and I realized you can just show them the book and ask them the questions anyway. What do you think about this subject? Where do you stand on the subject of the death penalty, for instance, just broadly? And also, I wanted to point out that the subject of the death penalty, okay, that's a broad, generalized thing, and we can agree or disagree, and we can talk about it. But the subject of the means, lethal injection, that is not abstract. That is actually first-hand reality for a very, very large number of people, including, I would imagine, a large number of you. we don't think about it this way. We draw a mental partition in our mind because I'm sure that you have never been to a state penitentiary to watch a prisoner be executed by lethal injection. But nevertheless, how many of those little rooms, those little antiseptic rooms, have you been in at veterinary hospitals to watch your loved one, your dog, be euthanized by lethal injection? When your dog is euthanized, it's a 2-injection process. One basically primes them and the other stops their heart. It is in almost all cases painless. It is in almost all cases complication free. Every time I've ever done it, the veterinarian, wherever it is, whatever state in the union it is, has always been very kind, very nice, and they've always gone out of their way to say, it's my duty to warn you, because you're already in a vulnerable state here. It's my duty to warn you that every once in a while, a dog will react poorly to these drugs, even though they are designed to preclude bad reactions. Every once in a while it will happen. And what they want you to know, what they want to stress to you, is that is an autonomous reaction on the part of the dog. They're not actually suffering. But in all the time that I have had that horrible last extremity, that horrible last duty, I've only had one dog react poorly. And no shade to little Dooley, but I just knew in the back of my mind that if any dog was going to react poorly, it was going to be him. That if any dog was going to be an extra source of anxiety, literally to the last second of his life, it was going to be Dooley. So I was, in a way, prepared. But most of the time, it's as sweet and quiet and instantaneous as could be. Most of the time, that is true. 99% of the time. So, and that's not theoretical. We all see that. We're all there when that happens. We're all holding someone who means the world to us when that happens to them. We're not behind a bulletproof glass. We're not watching them give us the finger. Or, in John Wayne Gacy's case, say, kiss my ass. We're not, it's nothing like that. It's totally affectionate, and it happens right in front of us. I think that might be why so many people have a misconception about lethal injection. Well, no matter what they think about the death penalty, I think that might be why the misconceptions exist. Certainly I have them. I have no idea what this author's going to tell me. I know from reading about death penalties lately that they aren't quick. The subject is usually writhing a bit. I don't know how widespread that is. I don't know how bad that is. Does the subject ever actually completely wake up? This author will tell me. This book will tell me. But I always found another element that I found fascinating about this. I found it fascinating when I was discussing it with Jack as well. It's just we didn't get into the nitty-gritty. I wish we had. I wish I'd had 3 hours to talk to him. Another aspect of this subject that I find fascinating is how much weight is put on the aesthetics without anyone ever saying so, without anyone ever admitting how much of our conception of this whole subject is bound up with aesthetics. The electric chair, the gas chamber, and lethal injection, what do they all have in common? No blood. No blood. Whereas, if the pub sheet here, and if the book is concerned with, let's say we're going to table the question of the morality of the death penalty just in general, and talk about the means of execution, and which are inhumane and which are humane. Well, there's an infallibly humane way to execute someone. Infallible. Give them a massive dose of a sedative. Now, it doesn't have to be an overdose, because an overdose can slide past the blood-brain barrier and cause convulsions of actual pain. A massive sedative, something that you would get at the hospital, something you would get at the hospital when you're told count backwards from 100. That doesn't ever fail. Even in my metabolism, that doesn't fail. I get to 70 instead of 90 the way you do, but I still pass out. A sedative can easily be administered. A nursing student can do it. And then once the person, again, leaving aside the morality of the state killing them at all, once the person is unconscious, behead them with a guillotine. A modern guillotine. Doesn't creak, it doesn't have blood spatters all over it, has no wood involved. A modern guillotine with a weight behind the blade. The blade is upkept, it is razor sharp, it can shave your face, and the weight behind it is 250 pounds. So it's going to go straight through the condemned person's neck instantly, easily. But there'll be blood. There'll be blood. A firing squad. There'll be blood. And I think that aesthetic element is more important than we often give it credit. An anesthetized patient who is beheaded in a guillotine or beheaded with a weighted blade, that is completely humane. There's no chance for that to go wrong. There's no chance for the patient to suffer. But there's blood. The body exsanguinates, and that can be spectacular. So is that what we're trying to avoid? Is that an aspect of what we're trying to avoid? The turn of phrase, the state shedding blood, hasn't been true in quite some time. The state does not shed blood. It kills without shedding blood, specifically, I think, to avoid that aesthetic. But a firing squad, I guarantee you there's at least one guy on your local police force who goes to the gym way too often and maybe has been divorced under sketchy circumstances and can infallibly kill someone with one painless shot to the heart. Wouldn't even need 9 people or 12 people, just that one weird guy. Employ him as an executioner. He'll never miss. The person will never suffer. They will literally be dead before their eyes can close. Those, if you're talking about the suffering of the condemned person, those are infallible, and there is no suffering. But it's something about the aesthetic that we don't like. This book is not going to be about aesthetics. This is going to be about how the horror of it all, and we shall see. I'm curious to know what you think about both things. Because, like I said, I think that people forget or overlook how personally connected they are with this subject. A lot of people. Some, it's even more personal than, well, if your personal affections run that way. For me, there is nothing more personal. But some people, well, I've done it too. Some people make the decision to do this with a loved one, a human loved one. We've all been in that position. A lot of us have been in that position. If you have a dog who's reached 16 years old, you're going to find yourself in that position. Unless you're lucky and unlucky enough to wake up one morning and they're dead. But otherwise, you're going to have to put them out of their misery. I know that's a cliche, but it ends up being literally true. And so you have seen lethal injections done. So I want to know about that. I want to know about lethal injections in prisons to inmates, and I want to know about the death penalty, just in general. This is a fascinating subject. This comes out in April, and I hope everybody reviews it. I hope actually that Jack writes about it. I will suggest it. But anyway, let's look at the actual open the package mail, and just hope. We'll just hope that we get through this without food for thought. We'll just remember that. Oh, okay, well, I've invoked Jack already. This is by James O'Toole. This is For I Have Sinned, The Rise and Fall of Catholic Confession in America. James O'Toole is a professor of history emeritus and a university historian at Boston College. And this is a book about the sacrament of confession. For generations, American Catholics went faithfully to confession, admitting their sin to a priest and accepting through him God's forgiveness. The sacrament served as a distinctive marker of Catholic identity, shaping parishioners' views of their relationship to God, their neighbors, and the wider world. But starting in the 1970s, many abandoned confession altogether. In the early United States, the Catholic Church grew rapidly, and with it, confession's centrality. Both priests and parishioners understood confession as a ritual crucial for the soul, while on a social level it established Catholic distinctiveness within a largely Protestant country. Today, however, even faithful Catholics seldom confess. How would you know that? I wonder. The reasons for this change, the author reveals, include the emergence of psychology and counseling, the Church's stance against contraception, which alienated many, and a growing sense of confession's inability to confront social problems like structural racism, poverty, and sexism. Meanwhile, increasing recognition of sexual abuse within the Church further undermined trust in clergy as confessors. I would say the emphasis there is all reversed. It's the sex scandal. The death of the Catholic Church is the sex scandal that broke here in Boston. Uh, no one wants to confess their sins in a private box in a confidential conversation with somebody they know is a predator. And now, once that hits the news, once a Mark Ruffalo movie is made out of it, suddenly it's not taboo to talk about it anymore. But those other things probably played a part as well. Yeah, okay. Well, this comes out in March. For I Have Sinned. I'd very much like Jack to write about this. We will see. He is, I think, destined for really big things. So probably he wouldn't want to write about it for open letters. Maybe he'd want to read it and talk about it. Maybe he can pitch it somewhere. That'd be great. Boy, oh boy, what I wouldn't give to see him write a 3,000-word review of this for Catholic Magazine or the Tablet or something like that. Again, I don't mean this whole mail haul to be about Jack, but I'll bring it up to him. So let's see here. Let's see what this next one is. Keeping in mind, food for thought. Okay. All right, this comes out in mid-January. This is the finished copy of Raul Rojas's book, The Language of Mathematics, The Stories Behind the Symbols. Appropriately black and white cover. I have the advanced copy of this, I think. Galileo famously wrote that the book of nature is written in mathematical language. This book is a wide-ranging and beautifully illustrated collection of short, colorful histories of the most commonly used symbols in mathematics, providing readers with an engaging introduction to the origins, evolution, and conceptual meaning of each one. An essential companion for math enthusiasts. Well, I would imagine. Is there a math enthusiast listening to me right now? To put it mildly, I am not a math enthusiast, but if there's a math enthusiast listening to me right now, I'd be happy to mail this out to you. This book shows how mathematics is a living and evolving entity, forever searching for the best symbolism to express relationships between abstract concepts and to convey meaning. Okay, so who is the dateless wonder of the author when he's at home? A professor of mathematics and statistics at the University of Nevada, Reno, and a professor emeritus of computer science and mathematics at the Free University of Berlin. Okay, well, okay. The Language of Mathematics. Feel free to let me know if you are the perfect recipient for that book. And then we'll do this last package. And if we can just get through this, then we'll be through this mail haul, and I will have made up for it. I felt bad once I deleted that video because I wanted to talk to you about the Lethal Injection book. I think it's absolutely fascinating. And we can talk about it without arguing about it, which is also fantastic. That we can talk about it without arguing about it. I don't think it's that hard for you to guess what my own stance on the death penalty is. It's not that hard to guess my own stance. I think that most of the law involving the death penalty is still mired in the pre-Cambrian ages in which it was written. Before videos, in other words, before video cameras, before closed-circuit TV. Before, in other words, the absence of doubt, before DNA and before videos. I know that probably the main argument that people can make about the death penalty is, what if you're wrong? What if you execute an innocent person, as that was the genesis of Jack's outrage, the genesis of his brilliant article. I'll try and find it and link it down below. Was exactly that, an innocent man who was murdered by the state. That is, of course, the ultimate caution. I don't think myself that that's a reason to remove the act of capital punishment from consideration. If you are a teenage boy and you are videotaped leaving the scene of the bombing of the Boston Marathon with a big laughing grin on your face because you have just blown the feet off a runner, because you have just bisected a little boy, because you've just terrorized a city, then you should get the death penalty that day. Not 15 years from now, not 20 years from now, you getting warm meals every day and library privileges. That day, you should get the death penalty. You should die that day because it's incontrovertibly you're incontrovertibly guilty. You do not need a trial. You are incontrovertibly visually guilty. eyewitness testimony, sure, you'll hear especially anti-theist apologists say all the time that eyewitness testimony is the least reliable form of testimony. Hogwash, but they'll still say it. But cameras don't get things wrong. Confessions don't get things wrong. If you aren't executed that day, once you confess, you should be executed. And not only that example, but I want to know what you think. Some of you obviously very much disagree with that, and I want to know why. I think it's wonderful that we can disagree about this without hating each other. I'm going to remember BookTube for that, for the wonder of that. But anyway, let's look at this. Oh, great. Oh, fantastic. All right, this is, I was waiting for this. Great. Please tell me you did not get to me late. No, early January. This is a new work in translation. Always up for new translations of established works, always. And this is about as established as it gets. If you're an American of a certain age, you read an English language translation of this work. This is a new translation of All Quiet on the Western Front. First new translation of this in quite some time, I think. We'll read the pub sheet and see. But the translation is by Kurt Beals, who's done an enormous amount of really good work. I wonder if this will say. Well, anyway, let's read about this. You don't need me to tell you about All Quiet on the Western Front, one of the most read war novels of all time. Let's see here. Okay, you've got blurbs. Okay. An immediate sensation. It was published in 1929. This book has sold more than 20 million copies worldwide since then, making it the best-selling German novel of all time. I'm thinking of a candidate. I wonder if that means best-selling German novel in translation. Well, anyway, its impact is indisputable. It has been adapted for film, television, and other media. It has influenced all subsequent works of war literature and has been taught in high school and college classes ever since. Absolutely true. This is a staple. Until now, one translation, published in 1929 and very much the product of its time, has introduced most readers in English to this wrenching portrait of the horrors of trench warfare. Now, nearly a century later, renowned translator Kurt Beals recaptures the energy and descriptive force of the German original, rendering the author's distinctly terse, telegraphic prose into a contemporary idiom and conveying for a new generation the intensity of this classic. His thoughtful work translates the author's story without assimilating the meaning. As he writes in his translator's introduction, he aims to translate the author's soldiers' words from German into English without translating his German soldiers into British or American soldiers. How incredible. How absolutely incredible. In this new translation, he maintains authentic German slang and sentiment to convey the sense of urgency and fear which permeated throughout the war and suffused the author's original prose. Okay, permeated means penetrate throughout. So permeated throughout you don't need. Permeated the war is fine. That's what it means. It means to penetrate throughout. So, but even so, it just doesn't matter. Okay, so the publicity bio for Kurt Beals gives me all of his bona fides, but none of his previous work. But he translated Steppenwolf last year, I think. I think he's the translator of that 3-volume Kafka biography. He's done a lot of work, and I've liked a lot of it. So great, fantastic. We now have a new translation of All Quiet on the Western Front coming out in January. Fantastic. Perfect example of what I talk about on this channel all the time. Well, the delicate way to put it is that I should never go book shopping. I should never go book shopping at the Brattle or any other secondhand shop. I should never do it. It's not just a question of old or out-of-print books that I don't need because I have a million of them. It's also a question of classics like this, which are going to get new editions, new introductions, new translations, new illustrations, and I'm going to get them. But anyway, that is the mail for today. So we have the Goldfinch. I'll use alcohol wipes to clean this up as much as it can be cleaned up, but I'm okay with it being a little scuffy. We have The Secrets of the Killing State, a new expose about the real nature of what happens when a prisoner dies of lethal injection. We have All Quiet on the Western Front in a new English translation coming out at the beginning of the year. We have The Language of Mathematics. You math wonks, let me know. And For I Have Sinned, about the sacrament of confession, which in the pub sheet is somewhat alarmingly written without a capital C. And also The True Death Toll of the Black Death. So there you go. That is the mail for today. I can't seem to make a video that's under 30 minutes, but I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll be back.